Halo 3 ODST is a great game. It's got likeable characters, a wonderful atmosphere, action-packed set pieces, and a haunting score. The fact that it was originally intended to be some DLC for Halo 3 makes what Bungie achieved all the more impressive. I mean, they made the whole thing in 14 months. Yes, 14 months. Take that, Cyberpunk. And whilst I'll always look back fondly on the game, there's always been a part of me that wondered, what if? Let me explain what I mean. So, Halo ODST released in 2009 when I were a mere lad, barely 14 years of age, and don't know why I'm doing that voice. The point is, I played Halo all the damn time. My dad had Combat Evolved on the original Xbox back when it first released, so I may have gotten into the franchise when I was a little too young. Cheers, Dad. Anyway, being a Halo-obsessed teenage boy, I used to watch a lot of Halo content. It didn't really matter what it was or who was making it. If it was Halo, I probably watched it. Halo's marketing back in the day was something really special to me, actually. The promotional videos they produced around Halo 3 were some of the best video game adverts I'd ever seen, possibly some of the best adverts I'd ever seen. I can't tell you how many times I watched that Believe advert, and the live-action videos had me craving a feature-length film, something Bungie was actually working on with Peter Jackson and Neil Blomkamp at the time, which tragically was cancelled, although it did result in District 9 being made and gave Bungie the time to work on ODST itself, so I guess, in a sense, I should be grateful that it was. It was around this time that the live-action trailer for ODST drops, not to mention Landfall, which was basically the test footage that they shot for the Halo film, and to say I was hyped would be an understatement. As a kid, I was really getting into the kind of, gritty war films and sci-fi epics. I know, I was a really cool kid. But it made my imagination just begin to run wild with these different ideas, marvelling at the potential of a Halo game that might actually reflect this gritty wartime aesthetic. The ODST trailer that released was so somber, it suggested these themes of loss and trauma, and then threw us immediately into these kind of intense, brutal combat scenes. I mean, it opens with a funeral, and then suddenly we're dropping down into this big war zone with this kind of Saving Private Ryan sort of feel to it. Needless to say, the game that released didn't really match the tone set out in the live-action trailer, and the ODST game that we got was more of that kind of classic Halo vibe, with that more arcadey combat, quippy marines, and a bit more of an adventurous spirit, if you like. Which absolutely is not a bad thing, but like I say, it got me thinking, what if we got something else? You see, whilst I love that ODST gave me more of that classic Halo power fantasy fun, over a decade later, I feel like the franchise could benefit from exploring other subgenres within the sci-fi FPS sphere. I mean, it worked for Halo Wars, so why not make another spin-off? There are now 6 Halo games where you get to do the whole Spartan super soldier thing. 7 if you include Infinite. I mean, you might as well even include ODST as well. Your health still regenerates, you can jump twice your own height, kill aliens with a single punch, rip turrets from their mounts. Shy of dual wielding, you're practically Master Chief from Halo 3, which is probably in part due to the game running on the same engine, and only having 14 months of development, so yeah, I'm not holding that against Bungie by any means. But my imaginary interpretation of a Halo game like ODST that puts you in the shoes of, say, your average Marine would take a far different approach. Obviously, my ideas are very idealistic. Redesigning the mechanics of an established franchise isn't easy, and depending on how different the direction might be, it might also involve needing a whole new game engine, so I appreciate it's not all going to be realistic, but it's fun to speculate, right? Some of my suggestions might upset your typical Halo fan, but like I said, you've got 6 to 8 Halo games that do the whole Spartan thing already. This is supposed to be different. It's fun to put a new spin on a universe you enjoy being in sometimes. I think one of the best examples I can give to explain how I'd want my version of ODST to feel would be the way it feels to fight certain enemies. Brutes in Halo are basically just another enemy to tackle. Okay, they take more damage than grunts and jackals, but generally speaking, a few well-placed shots or well-timed punches can bring them down pretty quickly. In this game, my imaginary game, I would want my brutes to feel more like this. Brutes would be violent, intimidating bastards. They'd tower over you, throw you around, pin your allies to walls with spikers, smash through cover, soak up small arms fire. No one-hit assassinations, taking them down would require thought, planning, and coordination. Elite would be much the same. If Marines could take out these specialist units as quickly as a Spartan, then what's the point in needing the Spartans in the first place? These guys would basically become regular mini-bosses, leading large squads of lesser infantry against you and your fellow Marines. The closest you can really get to this feeling at the moment is turning on certain skulls and trying it on Legendary. I think the best comparison I can probably give is Star Wars Republic Commando and the way it treats super battle droids. Like with Halo's Spartans, if you played as a Jedi in a Star Wars game, most of the droid forces were pretty quick to dispatch. Games like Battlefront, I'm talking about the good ones, had you gunning down battle droids, super battle droids, and droidicars alike, even as clones. And then along came Republic Commando, and to this day I still remember the surprise when I encountered the first super battle droid in the game. I was like, oh wait, this guy's tall, and his voice is all deep and hang on, he's not dying, oh god, he's not dying, wait, there's more than one, oh god! Eventually, as you get the hang of the game and you get better equipment, you can take them down faster, but they're never as easy to fight as the regular droids. You can still melee a droid once and take it out, and you can't do that with the super battle droids. You have to chip away at them, hit weak points, disarm them in order to take them out effectively. I imagine it being a similar situation with the elites. And brutes would be like if the Wookiees in Republic Commando were hostile and you were this poor green bugger being absolutely obliterated right here. Like, look at how the elites absolutely wreck the Marines in Halo Wars cutscenes. I mean, imagine actually being in the shoes of one of those guys. It'd be intense, right? The Spartan power fantasy has always made for fun gameplay, but that's all the more reason to put a spin on that formula and see what happens when you take that power away and the shoe is on the other foot. Republic Commando is a brilliant example of how to take something fun and familiar like Star Wars and give it a bit more of a gritty, edgy makeover. Up the brutality, make the players sweat, make them coordinate, and make them think. You can see this approach being reflected in the game's art style. These don't look like regular Star Wars characters. They're cool now, and there's blood. I'm not sure I've even seen a Star Wars game that shows human blood before. Yes, Halo already has blood, but you see the point I'm making, right? An approach like this can make for a really interesting and memorable take on an old and perhaps tired franchise. You could even take the squad mechanics from Republic Commando and put them in Halo. Imagine how many different ways you could approach a firefight with that kind of control. It's ironic actually, as I'm pretty sure some of the guys from Commando worked on Halo 5, and the so-called squad mechanics in that game are beyond atrocious, but there we go. There's so much potential in presenting the game in this way. You could have hunters and elite zealots becoming these crazy boss battles, the next-gen hardware would allow for larger scale, boots-on-the-ground warfare, a bit like those scenes that we'd see in some of the Halo Wars cutscenes and Reach's cinematics that looked really cool, but we never really got to experience for ourselves whilst playing the game. You could even incorporate the Flood and make a whole horror mission, which is something I've seen fans discuss before, and take a cue from the Aliens franchise where it's dark and you're vulnerable and your squad is being picked off. The Marines were clearly terrified by the Flood. I mean, just look at how they react to their arrival in Halo 3.
And then they got up, started to talk!
I mean, imagine actually being those Marines and watching characters you've come to know transform into these monsters. I could literally go on forever about the things I want to put in this game, but to save the video from becoming 3 hours long, I'll try now just to focus on the changes to the gameplay mechanics themselves. Let's start with health. It's pretty straightforward. You're not a super soldier, so you don't have shields, and you have less health, and it doesn't regenerate. You rely on pickups, perhaps some allies have healing abilities as well within your squad, and you could even incorporate some Far Cry style healing animations to make healing feel a bit more real and tangible, and something you can only do maybe if you're in cover and so on, so it becomes a little bit more tactical. Next is movement, and I don't think your typical Halo walking speed is too fast really, so this could still be pretty similar, but you can't jump anywhere near as high, and perhaps rely more on things like mantling. Sprint in Halo, I know, is a controversial issue, but I don't think having it in a campaign like this would be too big of a sin. You'd need that quick burst of speed to get out of some of those more intense encounters and kind of help compensate for the lower health. It doesn't mean it has to be in the multiplayer. We're just focusing on the solo campaign for now. We'll leave the multiplayer for another time, perhaps. When it comes to vehicles, I think it'd be interesting to maintain the first-person perspective, a bit like you might do in some of the Battlefield games. If the idea is to make you feel like a regular Marine, only seeing the world from their personal perspective would go a long way towards helping the immersion. That, and I just think it'd be cool to see the vehicles in first person for a change, but that's me. Finally, the weapons. I think there should definitely be a focus on human weapons. Let's say this takes place on Harvest when the Covenant first attacks. I think that's still the law, right? I can't keep up with it all. The Marines would never have seen, let alone picked up or used these weapons before. They'd have no idea what to do with them. I think it'd be fun to have the option to pick up some of them, maybe have them be these power weapons, but they're hard to control, low on ammo, and a bit temperamental to handle. A bit like the alien weapons in, say, Crysis 3, or again, Republic Commando, but they're less easy to control. Same would go as well for Covenant vehicles. Headshots on grunts, jackals, and drones would still do work, but brutes, elites, and hunters would be a little more spongy. Dual wielding and carrying around turrets would probably have to go, and I'd also be leaning more towards the idea of removing the fixed reticule and having players have to aim down sights and adding a little more weapon sway or bullet spray into the mix. Not so much that it's annoying or unsatisfying to use obviously, but just subtle enough that it's not as pinpoint accurate as some of the guns in more traditional Halo. Now I can already see some of the comments popping up and saying, you just want it to be COD. To which my answer is no. Just because a game has ADS does not make it Call of Duty. There are literally hundreds of FPS games that incorporate a mix of these mechanics. Even Republic Commando had an ADS mechanic. Just because an FPS game is more grounded and has this sort of boots on the ground gritty feel doesn't mean it has to be a COD clone. The point of including these changes in the approach to Halo's weapons is to differentiate it from playing as a Spartan. It needs to feel different, otherwise it might as well just be Halo 7 or Halo 12 or whatever Halo we happen to be on. So those are just some of the brief examples of the ideas I've dreamt up whilst contemplating this imaginary Halo game. I think the franchise has so much more it could explore, and the world and the lore is so vast now that it could easily lean towards any number of subgenres and probably still find success. I think it's almost a shame that the Halo games seem to be so streamlined now and focused on trying to repeat the success of previous games without really making any fundamental innovations in the way in which the world of Halo is approached as a whole. The live action footage that inspired my thoughts are beloved by so many fans, and I feel like there's an audience out there that would like to see this sort of thing, right? I fully appreciate that this is all highly unrealistic, and that a project like this would probably cost millions of dollars and require the full attention of a dedicated AAA dev team, and given 343's supposed 10-year plan for Infinite, which I don't know what that means, but that's what they're saying they're doing, I can't really see them having the time or inclination to do this sort of thing. I mean, at the end of the day, spin-off ideas like this are a risk, and straying from the known formula can have damaging financial results, or so the corporate overlords seem to believe. That's why we have so much franchise fatigue right now with so many different IPs. No one's really willing to experiment, but these experiments, when they're done correctly, can also find success. I mean, look at Halo Wars, for example. Either way, there's no harm in throwing out ideas and creating a discussion. So there you go. There's my ideas for the Halo game we'll probably never get to see.